Close your eyes and imagine a wall that stretches beyond sight, across mountains, valleys, deserts, and rivers, an endless line of stone, whispering with the voices of centuries. This is not just a wall. It is a story carved into the earth itself. Tonight, we will walk slowly along its ridges. We will listen to the footsteps of emperors, the cries of workers, the silence of soldiers who kept their watch. From the earliest earth ramparts to the mighty stone dragon of the Ming, we will follow the Great Wall of China through time. Let the world outside fade. Let the rhythm of history carry you. This is the Great Wall of China, building the endless barrier. Close your eyes and imagine a vast northern plain stretching far beyond the horizon. The wind moves like an invisible river, carrying dust across valleys and mountains. Long ago, before China was one empire, there were many kingdoms. Each feared the horsemen who came from the north. Swift riders, arrows darkening the sky, raids that could strip a village of food, animals, and people overnight. To guard against them, rulers began raising walls of earth. They were not yet the stone towers we see today, but lines of rammed soil, piled high by thousands of hands. Farmers pressed in his service, soldiers digging trenches, prisoners pushing heavy carts. Day after day, under sun and storm, the wall crept forward across the land. The walls were not just barriers of soil. They were symbols, lines where one kingdom ended and another began. For the people who worked, though, it was less about glory and more about survival. Their hands blistered, their backs ached, and the sound of shovels never ceased. The dream of walls was born not from peace, but from fear. As the walls grew longer, they began to shape the landscape itself. Imagine standing on a hillside and watching a line of packed earth snake across valleys, over rivers, and up mountainsides, like a giant scar across the land. From a distance, it looked endless, and to those who built it, it felt endless too. At night, camps of workers lit fires along the half-built wall. The glow of flames flickered on the soil, and the voices of men drifted into the dark, telling stories of families far away. Some spoke of returning home with pride. Others whispered doubts, fearing they might never return at all. The wall was more than a barrier. It was a test of human endurance. For every brick of earth pressed into place, there was a story of sweat, hunger, or loss. And though no one knew it at the time, these early walls were only the beginning of a far greater vision, one that would unite kingdoms and demand even greater sacrifice. Generations later, whispers turned to legend. Children were told of the long walls their fathers and grandfathers had built. They were taught to imagine them not as simple mounds of soil, but as dragons sleeping across the land. Dragons that kept invaders at bay, but also demanded endless offerings of labor. The wind carried dust against these early walls, slowly wearing them down. Yet they stood stubbornly against time. Farmers still looked up at them while plowing fields, and soldiers still marched along their ridges. In this way, the idea of the wall became as enduring as the stones and earth themselves. It was no longer only about protecting borders. It was about shaping identity. And soon, one man would rise with a vision so vast, he would command the joining of all walls into a single, unbroken barrier. His name was Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. The year was 221 BCE. For centuries, rival kingdoms had fought across the land, each building their own walls of earth. But then, one ruler rose above them all, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. His armies swept through the divided lands, uniting them by force, and for the first time in history, China became one empire. But uniting the inside was not enough. The emperor feared the nomadic horsemen who still roamed beyond the northern horizon. Their raids had never stopped, and now his empire stretched further than any wall before it. He issued a command that shook the land. All the old walls must be joined together, repaired, and extended. From a yellow sea in the east to the deserts in the west, a single barrier would rise. It would be the greatest project ever attempted, an endless wall. The decree spread like thunder. Farmers, prisoners, soldiers, and even scholars were forced into labor. Tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands, were taken from their homes. The wall became not just a shield against the north, but a vast machine that consumed human lives. Imagine the camps stretched across the mountains. Rows of tents, the smoke of cooking fires, the sound of hammers striking wood and stone. Men carried baskets of earth on their shoulders, their feet sinking into mud, their breaths heavy in the thin mountain air. Soldiers barked commands, overseers cracked whips, and the rhythm of labor beat like a drum across the valleys. Food was scarce. Workers often survived on millet porridge, thin soup, or whatever roots they could find in the hills. Many grew sick from hunger or froze during harsh winters. The wall rose slowly, brick by brick, but the cost was immense. It was said that for every yard of wall, a life was lost. Some whispered that the dead were buried beneath the very stones they had carried, their bones hidden within the wall itself. And still, the work did not stop. The emperor demanded progress, no matter the cost. His vision was not only to defend his empire, but to carve his name into eternity. To him, the wall was not just a barrier. It was a monument to his power, stretching further than any ruler before him had ever dreamed. At night, the workers lay on the cold ground, staring at the stars above. Many wondered if the heavens saw their suffering or if the gods had turned their faces away. Legends began to rise from these camps. Tales of restless spirits wandering the ridges, of ghosts whispering in the wind, of women searching for lost husbands who would never return. Among these stories was one of a woman named Meng Jiangnu, whose husband was taken to the wall and never returned. She traveled across mountains to find him, only to learn he had died in labor. Her sorrow was so deep, it was said her cries shook the heavens, and part of the wall collapsed, revealing the bones of the countless dead. Whether true or not, her tale spread far and wide, becoming a symbol of the wall's hidden cost. Still, the wall continued to grow. Across deserts, rivers, and ridges, it crept forward, an endless line of stone and earth. For Qin Shi Huang, it was triumph. For the people, it was suffering. And for history, it was a story that would never be forgotten. The Qin dynasty fell, but the wall did not. Like a sleeping giant, it stretched across mountains and valleys, waiting for the next empire to awaken it. That empire was the Han. In the 2nd century BCE, the Han emperors looked westward beyond deserts and mountains, toward the unknown lands of Central Asia. There, silk, horses, spices, and strange treasures flowed along what would become known as the Silk Road. But trade brought danger. Caravans carried riches, and nomadic horsemen still prowled the steppe. To protect their lifeline, the Han rebuilt and extended the wall. Watchtowers rose higher, beacon fires were prepared, and garrisons of soldiers took their posts along the ridges. At night, a lonely soldier stood atop a tower, staring into the vast dark. If enemy riders appeared, he would light a fire. From one tower to the next, the signal would leap like lightning, racing hundreds of miles in a single night. The wall became not only a shield, it was a living nervous system, warning of danger long before it arrived. Life along the Han Wall was different than in Qin times. Soldiers still endured hunger, cold, and isolation, but they also lived at crossroads of culture. Traders from Persia, India, and far beyond passed through the guarded gates. Camels loaded with silk jingled with bronze bells, their shadows stretching long across the desert sand. Merchants told stories of lands with golden temples, emerald seas, and skies filled with unfamiliar stars. For the Chinese soldiers, these travelers were glimpses of a world they might never see. Yet they were also a source of unease, for with trade came strangers, and with strangers came uncertainty. The wall stood not only against warriors, but also as a reminder that beyond its stones lay the unknown. At the base of the wall, small towns grew. Inns, stables, and markets thrived near its gates. Children ran through narrow streets, their laughter echoing against fortress walls, while their parents traded grain for spices or silk for horses. The wall, once only a barrier of war, became a bridge of commerce. Still, fear never fully vanished. On quiet nights, guards heard the distant thunder of hooves across the grasslands. The Xiongnu horsemen, swift and merciless, could strike without warning. Entire villages huddled behind the wall, praying that the fire signals would give them enough time to flee. The Han emperors spent fortunes to maintain their barrier. Stone, timber, and men were poured into its defenses. Yet the wall was more than stone. It was an idea, the belief that China could protect not just its land, but its way of life. As centuries passed, the wall stretched further into the deserts of the West, where shifting sands swallowed its stones and wind howled through its empty towers. Travelers crossing the Silk Road would pause, touch the weathered bricks, and feel the weight of history beneath their hands. The Han Wall became both guardian and ghost, a silent witness to the flow of goods, the clash of cultures, and the endless struggle between safety and freedom. Centuries passed, and dynasties rose and fell. By the time of the Tang Dynasty, the world around the wall had changed. The empire stretched wide and powerful, its army strong, its borders secure. For a time, the horsemen of the north posed less danger, and the Silk Road flowed with wealth. The wall, once so crucial, now stood quiet. Its towers still watched the horizon, but their fires were rarely lit. Soldiers posted along its ridges grew fewer in number. Some towers were left empty, their doors broken, their stones weathered by wind and rain. Villages began to sprout where garrisons had once stood. Farmers used bricks from the wall to build homes, wells, and stables. Children climbed over the old ramparts, laughing where once men had stood ready with bows and arrows. The Great Barrier of War was becoming part of everyday life. Imagine a traveler on the road during the Tang era. He passes a stretch of the wall overgrown with grass, its edges softened by time. Sheep graze where armies once marched. Birds nest in the cracks of old towers. The traveler rests in the shade of its ruins, not fearing attack, but marveling at the silence. The wall, once a scar across the land, now seemed like a forgotten skeleton. Its stones no longer shouted of war. They whispered of memory. In peaceful times, walls lose their purpose. And so, through the Tang and into the Song dynasty, the Great Wall faded into the background, half remembered, half abandoned. But history is never still. Beyond the quiet fields and crumbling towers, forces were gathering strength. To the north, the steppe riders watched, waiting for their moment. The peace of the Tang and Song would not last forever. As the wall crumbled, stories about it grew. Poets wrote verses of its lonely towers, silhouetted against the moon. Travelers described it as a sleeping dragon, its body stretched across mountains and deserts, slumbering under grass and stone. For the people who lived beside it, the wall was no longer only a shield. It was part of their world. Stones carried to build hearths. Earth used to shape fields. Towers turned into lookout posts for watching flocks of sheep. The line between fortress and village blurred. And yet, in the silence of the night, one could still imagine what the wall once was. Fires blazing from tower to tower, horns echoing across valleys, soldiers gripping spears against the dark. Its glory was not gone, only hidden beneath time. And soon, when invaders returned with thunderous force, the wall would awaken again. This time stronger, taller, and made not of earth, but of stone. The Mongol invasions swept across China like wildfire. During the 13th century, under Genghis Khan and his heirs, the horsemen of the steppe broke through every barrier, even toppling the mighty cities of the Song dynasty. For a time, China itself was ruled by the Mongols in the era of the Yuan dynasty. But when the Ming rose to power in the 14th century, they remembered those dark days well. They knew the horsemen could not be underestimated. And so, unlike the Tang and Song, the Ming emperors turned again to the wall. But this time, it would not be the old earthen ramparts. It would be stone and brick, strong enough to withstand centuries of storms and riders alike. The wall was rebuilt and extended, not as a single line, but as a system of fortresses, towers, and ridges. Watchtowers rose like teeth against the sky. Mountain passes were sealed with iron gates. The wall twisted across the landscape like a colossal stone dragon, its body stretching further than the eye could see. For the workers, the task was almost beyond human strength. Imagine carrying heavy bricks up the steep sides of jagged mountains, where the air thins and every breath feels heavy. Thousands of men hauled stone blocks, tied with ropes, lifted by pulleys, dragged by oxen. The sound of chisels striking stone echoed across valleys, while the clatter of carts filled the roads. Some workers were soldiers, others were peasants pressed into service, and many were prisoners. They lived in camps where the winters froze them and the summers scorched them. Food was meager: boiled millet, dried beans, sometimes only roots and grass. Disease spread easily. For many, the wall was not a monument of pride, but a sentence to death. Yet still it rose. Each tower was a small fortress with stone walls, barracks, and storage rooms. Soldiers stationed their lit signal fires at the first sight of enemies. These flames could leap from tower to tower, covering hundreds of miles in a single night. When the fires blazed, the empire knew danger was near. Life for the Ming soldiers on the wall was lonely and harsh. Long winters howled with bitter winds that cut through armor and cloth. Snow buried the towers, leaving men huddled close to fires, their breath clouding in the frozen air. Summers were no kinder, with blazing sun beating down on endless stone and dust storms rising from the plains. Yet duty bound them. Day after day, soldiers walked the ramparts, their footsteps echoing on stone, eyes scanning the horizon for the faintest sign of riders. Families were often left behind, wives and children living in distant villages, while their fathers and husbands stood guard on the high ridges. Some never returned, their names forgotten, but their watch eternal. The wall of the Ming was not only stone. It was sacrifice of blood, sweat, and countless lives. From afar, it looked like a dragon guarding the empire, but up close, it was the sum of human struggle. A monument carved not just into the mountains, but into the hearts of the people. The Ming wall stood for centuries, but even the strongest stone cannot stop time. As dynasties rose and fell, its towers slowly crumbled, its stones loosened by wind and rain. Yet the wall never vanished. It endured as a scar across the land, visible from villages, roads, and mountain paths. Generations of travelers walked beside it, their footsteps joining those of countless forgotten builders and soldiers. Stories surrounded it like mist. Some said it was so vast it could be seen from the moon. Others claimed dragons had guided its path across mountains and rivers. Poets wrote verses of its loneliness, of a wall that reached toward eternity. For the people, it was both a wonder and a warning, a reminder of human ambition and of the lives consumed by that ambition. In time, the wall became more than defense. It became symbol, a line not just of stone, but of identity. It marked the meeting place of China and the wide world beyond. Traders once rested in its shadow, soldiers once died on its ridges, and now travelers climb its steps to gaze across the horizon. Standing upon the wall today, the wind feels the same as it did centuries ago. It whistles through broken towers. It carries dust across valleys. It whispers of the endless labor that gave birth to this barrier. Each brick, each stone is a story. A hand that placed it, a back that bent beneath its weight, a voice that once sang or wept upon these ridges. The wall has survived storms, wars, and silence. It has become eternal not because it is unbroken, but because its memory is unbroken. And so, the Great Wall of China remains, part ruin, part monument, part dream. It is not truly endless, but to those who walk it, it feels without end. Mile after mile, tower after tower, stretching like a dragon asleep upon the earth. It is a reminder that walls can protect, but they can also imprison. That they can inspire awe, but also sorrow. That history is not only written in books, but in stone, sweat, and sacrifice. As you drift now in a silence, imagine yourself walking slowly along its ancient path. The stones are cool beneath your hands, the horizon wide before your eyes. The voices of centuries rise and fade with the wind. The wall stands, as it always has, against the sky, an endless barrier and an endless story. And so our journey comes to an end. The Great Wall, whether broken or standing tall, remains a thread through centuries, a memory that does not fade. It is a wall built by hands, but carried forward by stories, by loss, by pride, and by dreams. As the last echoes of footsteps fade from its stones, we are left with silence. The same silence that drifts across its towers tonight, under the stars, under the moon. Rest now, as the dragon sleeps upon the mountains. The wall stands still, and the story rests with